I mean, that's not mine anyways, but just to show what the new normal has become due to COVID-19. So, like I said, people have been forced to work from home. A lot of countries last year had an enforced lockdown where you couldn't even go to the market, or days were picked in a week where you could go to the market, or you could leave your houses, or you could go to the office and things like that. A lot of that has reduced now, but that was what COVID-19 brought about. As a result, a lot of us now had to work from home. A lot of people didn't have to go to the office. In fact, I know people that have not been to their offices in over a year now. And we've also seen people getting more access to jobs outside their geographical location. So people are able to get work in different countries as well. We've noticed a rapid technology adoption where, for instance, kids in schools who did not used to use the internet before, or who were not really using it for learning, have now, or were now forced to get maybe tablets and to join class meetings via Zoom and things like that. We've seen organizations where, like, for instance, banks in my country, where they would typically have to work from the office. A lot of the back end staff were now working remotely and things like that. So there's a lot of technology adoption. In the universities as well, we've seen lecturers in places where they would typically not use the internet or use remote learning. They had to do all this. And this led to a lot more people coming online. And I said this happened without adequate preparation, because a lot of people were not trained on using these technologies prior to COVID-19. And many of them they were just given the devices or told you have to work from home and connect via the internet. There's an increased movement to the cloud. This particular point was already happening before COVID anyways, but like every other thing that was already happening, there was an increment in the need to use cloud infrastructure and to migrate services to cloud. We've had more cases of burnout, or at least there's a seeming perception of that. If you go on Twitter or on LinkedIn, within the cybersecurity circle, there are a lot more people complaining about the amount of hours they're spending on their devices, is being more than usual. People complaining about too many activities, too many things to do, and not enough breaks. So some people have the opinion that you tend to work more hours when you're working from home than when you're in the office. And yeah, more people have also complained, or we've seen a lot of complaints about mental health related issues as well. There's also the issue of jobs that were lost. A lot of organizations had to downsize. A typical example is of how COVID affected business is in football, for instance. A couple of clubs started asking their players to take pay cuts and to reduce to try and reduce the wage bill of the organizations, of the football clubs, because revenue went down as fans couldn't come to the stadium to watch matches anymore. The revenue was drastically cut down, and you can imagine how that would have affected those organizations. And this happened across different industries. And so at this point, I would just like our participants, or anyone here anyways, to maybe put in the chat box anything they feel like COVID-19 led to that I have not mentioned on this slide. Just put in the chat box for us, for like a way to look at where we were and where we are now. I will go on with more facts and figures. 95% of security breaches are caused by human error. 245,000 plus phishing websites were reported in January 2021. That's a lot for just 1 month. The average cost of a ransomware attack on businesses is estimated at $133,000 US, and $17,700 US is lost every minute due to a phishing attack. And if you look at the figures before 2020, they were not this much. So we've seen a rapid increase in the percentage of the breaches, in the number of attacks, the cost of the attacks as well, and how much is lost per minute, which again, I say is tied to which is tied to the pandemic. So in our different countries, in our different locations, we've seen several things have come up due to the previous issues I mentioned, or the previous trends that happened due to COVID. One of them is data, is what I term as data privacy concerns. We've noticed that there are a lot more cases of malicious apps, malicious websites, or even those that are just poorly developed or poorly built. On the Android App Store, we've seen cases where people are downloading apps, or where apps haven't been exploited. Recently, there was the case of the Samsung bloatware that apparently tends to breach the user's privacy at some level. And there are several other apps. There was a popular app, or an app that was created for social media, and then at the end of the day, it was shown that it basically just collected user data. I don't want to mention the apps. There are at least two that come to mind. And so we've seen this kind of issues because more people are online, and there's a lack of, I don't want to say understanding, but there's a lack of concern as regards to personal privacy online. A lot of people don't really bother to look at terms and conditions. A lot of people don't bother to understand what information exactly this application or this website collecting from me, and what are they doing with that data. We've seen government policies. I'll use my country as an example because it's where I have more information about. Government policies have been met with, let's say, some form of resistance because people do not trust that the data will be used properly. For instance, the case of the national identity number linkage to SIM card and SIM to phone numbers in my country. A lot of people felt that this was a breach of privacy. In certain Asian countries where contact tracing was taken to another level via CCTV cameras and other forms of surveillance, a lot of the citizens there also complained. So all these policies were brought up for different reasons, but like I said, they are data privacy concerns. I wouldn't have done justice to this topic if I don't mention phishing or social engineering. And in the bracket, I mentioned whaling, business email compromise, and CEO fraud, simply because this is the type of phishing attack that targets the C-level staff in organizations. The idea is that if you can get access to their emails, or if you can get them compromised, then you stand a chance of cashing out, of making a lot of money from your scam. And so we've seen many more cases of these phishing emails, particularly the ones that target C-level executives of big organizations around the world. And this is not going to stop. A lot of organizations who tend to carry out financial transactions via emails or give instructions of financial transactions via emails are increasingly being attacked because that email has become a way of issuing instructions. And so if the attacker gets access to those emails, they can issue an instruction for the CFO, for instance, to make a payment, or to even send an email to clients and request them to make payments for services that have been rendered. And so this kind of threat is always going to be with us because it's always a way for attackers to make money. There are more cases of outsider and insider threats. If you talk about insider threats, talk about cases of industrial espionage, which sometimes might not happen intentionally in the scenario where your work laptop, for instance, is stolen from you and there's access to the data on the laptop. That may not be an intentional aspect, but it's also part of insider threats. there are lots of cases where, because the devices you use for work are shared with your family members, and because not everyone might be as tech savvy or security conscious as you are, they may use those computers to access malicious websites or to download malicious apps, which could steal data or infect your system with a malware. And so we also see in cases of outsider threats, which you could kind of blanket any other kind of attack on that, where organizations are hacked and their data is stolen, or malware is put on their network to compromise the systems and the network as a whole. One of the big malware that has become a problem all around the world now is ransomware, and it has gotten to a point that I said it's now on steroids. The figures are alarming if you look at the growth figures, and there's a lot of let's say ransomware for higher services around. A lot of people now there's now easy access to ransomware where you can launch an attack on an organization. The amount of money being requested as well for ransom has gone up. Everybody's seen as an opportunity to make the most money. So, and we need to be careful, because there are cases of these attacks or these threats being merged. We've seen where a phishing email might also come with an attachment that could be a malware, or it could come with a link that will take you to a file, or that will download a zip file, or other methods to try and evade maybe your antivirus software or solution. So the threat landscape is evolving every day. We've seen ransomware attacks where the attacker is not just concerned about locking your system and asking you for a ransom, but the attacker is also trying to exfiltrate your data, to steal the data on your devices, so that if you feel as if, oh, you have a backup, they could now threaten you that they will put that data on the internet. So it has become a period of more caution. Also, we've seen cases of recruitment scams where people come online and say, there's this job at this location, apply via this email, and you are basically providing your resume and your personal information to attackers unknown to you anyways. A lot of online scams on social media, people posting stories about maybe a family member being ill, just to solicit funds from people who have empathy and who have pity on the situation. So it has become a period for a lot of caution on how we interact on the internet and how we operate in the working environment as well. And so this will take me to our desire for Africa. What do we want to see in the cyberspace in Africa? We want a situation where the workforce is equipped with IT skills, so that we are not taken by surprise by a pandemic and now find ourselves trying to equip people with IT skills so they can effectively work from home. Ideally, our workforce should have such skills already, so that it's not a pain point to get people up to speed or to get them to perform from wherever they are. Due to this increased dependence on the internet and technology, we are exposed to cyber threats. And so it is important for all our employees to be aware of these cyber threats, so that they can find it easy to identify them and know how to respond to them. And they also know what to do in case they become victims as well. And for us to be effective in cybersecurity awareness or cybersecurity risk mitigation, there must be adequate talent. So we keep hearing about the cybersecurity talent shortage around the world, where there's a popular figure that says about 3.5 million cybersecurity staff are needed. There's a shortage of 3.5 million, I think, for 2021 or 2020, so I can't really remember. And as a result of this shortage, I believe there's a strong need for us around the world to match the academia efforts with that of the industry needs. So we need to make sure the graduates that are coming out of schools are able to fit to easily fit into the roles available in the industry. That way we have more people in the talent pipeline. We also need to create more junior roles. A lot of organizations, SMEs as well, would hire a CISO or a senior security officer and maybe just one or two lower staff. And the danger here is you might not have enough people on board, and it doesn't give room for growth as well. So we need to create more junior roles. There needs to be room for growth so that people can learn on the job, improve themselves, and contribute more to the industry and to the organization as well. And in line with this, I would just like to say that there's a need for us to take a chance on people. You might not always get the candidate you desire, your ideal candidates, but if someone, I would just like to advise us as leaders in the industry that if someone meets certain criteria and they are trainable and they are willing to learn, it might be worth taking a shot on them as opposed to looking for a unicorn. We would also like to see an increase in the collaboration between players within the cloud and cybersecurity industries within our countries and across the continent and even the globe at large. There are more players in the industry now, and a lot more can be achieved if we work in unison as opposed to working in silos. There's room for collaboration and partnerships which can be mutually beneficial. So I would like to encourage us that this is another way to go, because we achieve more when we join forces together. And there should be room for an increase in trust. Ideally, when there's more collaboration, it's natural for trust to build. And this gives room for efficient or adequate knowledge sharing and intelligence sharing as well. We're in a very dynamic environment, very fast-changing, fast-paced industry. And so we need to be able to share intelligence on the kinds of attacks, the kinds of malware, the indicators of compromise, how these are handled, so that we can build ourselves and we can build the industry as well. In our individual countries, there's a need to build and to push for the establishment of national and sectorial incident response teams. The reason is it is normal that different industries will have different priorities. There are different attacks that will be of more risk or more danger to one industry than the other. And so it is important for us to have sectorial incident response teams who are trained in those areas, who understand the operations of that industry and who would know what assets are at risk and what assets need to be protected at all costs. This will make the incident response teams more efficient, as they have fewer organizations and assets to take care of, as opposed to if we have just a few IRTs in the country. And this should also apply at the national level, where there are organizations that their specialty is the protection of critical national information infrastructure. We also need to, as industry players, especially those of us in the private sector, we need to understand what the government is doing towards in line with the push for growing and securing cloud infrastructure in our industry. So we need to understand the efforts the government is making, and we need to see how we can align our own efforts with theirs. We need to find a room for synergy and for mutual understanding, so we can even offer suggestions on what is desirable in the industry. So if we see the government as an enemy or as a body that is not willing to listen, or feel like they will not take our opinion seriously, then we stand the risk of them coming up with policies or efforts that might not necessarily benefit the industry. So we need to find an avenue for better collaboration, better discussions, so that the efforts of the government can be aligned with what the industry needs, as it were. So that is all for me as a keynote speech. My aim is just to introduce us or to remind us of where we are in this pandemic and where the industry is, and also where it should go or where we hope for it to be in the near future. As I conclude, please permit me to point our attention towards the Cybersecurity Nigeria conference, which is coming up in October this year. It will be held in Lagos, but there will also be a virtual aspect, so it's hybrid. Please go to the website to register so that we can also create more avenues for partnerships and for mutually beneficial discussions to take our industry forward. Thank you very much. That will be all for me. Feel free to reach out to me via my contact information below. Thank you very much for having me.